conference. This is coming to you via the internet because of the state of the world right now, which might be different when this is aired in July, but we'll see. So my name is Christian. I'm a promoter in New York City for Live Nation. I've been a promoter since I was 16. We have some amazing promoters and talent buyers here with us. I'm going to let everybody go one by one, but I'm going to start with my friend Mike Zemer and then go from there.
What's up, guys? This is Mike Zemer. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I do a music festival called So What Music Festival, and I run a company called Third String Productions. We put on 200 to 300 events, including parties, concerts, and of course the festival, all across Texas in Houston, Austin, San Antonio, and Dallas.
Cool. Jesse, why don't you roll next?
All right, I'm Jesse Lundy. I'm Philadelphia. I'm with Point Entertainment. We work with the Ardmore Music Hall. We have a 110 cap called The Locks at Sona. We also work with Milk Boy, the Colonial Theater in Phoenixville. I have shows at the Keswick. I have an Avett Brothers show coming up at the Mann Center for the Performing Arts. We book a whole mess of concerts in the park in the summertime. I booked Philadelphia Folk Festival for 10 years. I taught at Drexel for 13 years. And I've done lots of stuff like that.
Cool. Thank you very much. Graham, let's roll you next.
Hey, I'm Graham Noel. I'm a Philly-based promoter. My resume isn't nearly as long as my friend Jesse Lundy's here, but we work together. One of the town buyers at Ardmore Music Hall, 600 caps just outside of Center City, Philadelphia. Milk Boy, and a club in Wayne, PA called 118 North.
Cool. Brennan?
Hey, this is Brandon from Chameleon Club in Lancaster, PA. I book the Chameleon, which is an 800 cap room, as well as a venue in Harrisburg called HMAC, which is about 1,100. I've been promoting there since 2017. Before that, an independent promoter, as well as a DIY touring band since I was about 14 years old.
That's awesome. Cool, man. So, okay, you're a good example of what I was going to say next. So, I don't think anybody wakes up when they're a kid and says, "I want to grow up and be a promoter," right? I mean,
no.
Here, thought that they're going to be a promoter when they got older. I think when you're a promoter, it's a lot of times you're a failed musician. Is that fair to say? Or you've toured. So I love hearing from other promoters how they got into it, because it is a bug. Once you start booking shows and it works well, it's like the first time you get tattooed, you just want to get more, right? So let's hear how each of you guys actually got into this, and if you love it or hate it. So we'll start with let's go Jesse first, because I'm sure he has some great stories.
All right. I went to the University of Maine. I was there 90 to 94. So I was prime time, touch of gray era. Everybody loves the Grateful Dead, but in rural Maine.
Everybody?
Pretty much everybody. Plenty of hippies, I promise.
Okay.
And,
in Maine, yeah.
But I played in bands. I wrote for the school paper. I worked for the radio station. And I learned how to turn on the PA at our on-campus venue because my band would rehearse there. And the next thing I know, I'm learning how to be a sound person there. And by the time I got out, my last term at school, they had me book the room. And I said, geez, this feels like a much more exciting thing than my journalism degree might get me. And when I got out, I couldn't even really put a name on what I wanted to do. Yeah. I was lucky because my uncle is very good friends with Larry Magid, who is Philadelphia's Bill Graham.
Larry legend, yeah.
Yeah. And Larry gave me the opportunity to either be his personal assistant or work in the marketing department. And like a putz, I immediately said, I should work in the marketing department because I have a journalism degree.
Right.
And sent myself off into the trenches there. But I worked for Electric Factory Concerts for a few years, learned a lot. When New Park Entertainment, which was a competitor, formed, they let me come in and start to develop as a talent buyer, which was a huge, awesome thing. And that story goes on, but that's how I got in.
That's awesome.
It was who I knew, but it was also a desire to do it.
And when you were doing it, like you said, did you even know what, you didn't really know what it was, right? Like you didn't be a promoter.
Yeah.
What was it? And we're probably in the similar age, maybe a little bit older than some of these guys. What was it called back then too?
It was the same thing. I mean, the deal was that we knew who Bill Graham was from listening to Dead Tapes. That's why I brought it up. Sure. Yeah. And so when I got to Philly and started working at EFC, all of a sudden I was like, this is as big a deal as that. I mean, I'm looking at gold records, Frampton Comes Alive, Made Out to Larry. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, you know. But it was, you know, it was learning what the names of the other jobs were. When all of a sudden one day I was like, wait a minute, all I do is call newspapers all day and try to get them to write about our shows. I'm a publicist. You know what I mean? Or, hey, I've got to put a show file together for Rod Stewart at the Spectrum. I'm a marketing guy, you know, and it's just all of the different components came together over time. But I didn't have a roadmap or even a picture of what those components might be to start with. You know, I had done all those things in college, but it all fell under the same umbrella of I'm the only person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you know, this is all pre-internet too. So you read books, you know?
Or ask people. Like,
Yeah, ask people. Exactly.
That's when you learn there's no dumb questions, just dumb answers.
No, exactly. Yep. Dumb answers. Amen.
Job by Aaron. So, hey, Graham, why don't we roll you next? What's your backstory and how did you get the bug?
Yeah, so I guess I got the bug through playing music, like a lot of us. I played in a metal band through high school that went through college.
What was the name of your band?
It's called Lore. It's still a band, LOR.
Sick.
I'll give them some publicity. I'm not in it.
Oh, okay.
Although I do play. But yeah, the intention was I want to play music as a career. I might as well learn how to do that. So I decided to go to Drexel for entertainment and arts management. Didn't get into the music industry program there, so that was plan B. And sort of just wanted to feel out exactly my path. Great thing about Drexel is they have a great co-op program, so I got to try my hand at many different things, starting with a record label. I worked at Relapse Records for my first internship, and then I found myself at the Trocadero Theater for my second internship. That turned into a full-time job out of college, and it was doing anything that they asked me to. Did a lot of ticketing, production assistant work, running, and then a couple months in, the owner asked if anyone would be interested in booking the balcony, which was a small, they called it 250 cap, but it was a lot less than that.
I don't think it was. Yeah, I was up there a couple
Yeah.
times. It's a balcony too, so like
Yeah.
it was that going for it as well.
So AEG booked the room while I was there. So they wanted to keep the calendar clear. Shows didn't happen concurrently upstairs and downstairs, only on rare occasions. So it was basically, I didn't have a lot of lead time in booking shows there. So it was like, okay, this date is open 5 weeks in advance. Graham, you can start throwing shows there. So there's a lot of local shows, a lot of relationships that I built just playing with metal bands. But it wasn't really like, didn't have much of a mentorship there. I didn't really learn exactly how it should be done until I landed at my current place at Ardmore Music Hall. But I bounced around a little after that. I didn't leave that job knowing exactly that I wanted to do booking. Maybe left that even a little bit like, oh, this is a pain in the ass. I'm not sure I want to do it. So I did a lot. After that, I worked at the Mann Center. I did backstage hospitality there, which was a phenomenal job. It was so much fun.
So so like Jesse said, you're a bit of a journeyman. You've like kind of done a little bit of everything to get you to the spot where you're at right now.
Yes, absolutely. I even worked for Ardmore Music Hall very briefly while I was working at the Mann Center, just in the box office and a little bit in the office. So it wasn't until I basically got to the big leagues where I realized how much I loved it.
Yeah.
Doing actual booking on a higher level and having a mentor who can help me navigate exactly every situation, which I'm very grateful for. The owner, Chris Perella at Ardmore Music Hall. So yeah, it was a roundabout way, and I hope I can continue to be there and do the same thing for decades to come.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much. So why don't we go to Brandon?
Yeah, I started out as a person in a band. I was a 14-year-old shitty kid that wanted to be in a grunge band. and we couldn't
Come
get
on, really? Is it
Right.
a grunge band?
I wanted to be in a grunge band.
Because I don't think anybody who actually listens to music uses the term grunge. That's just like something the paper's made up to like stay with the
But I was from a town, Mount Joy, Pennsylvania. Like that was real to me. Like I thought that was the coolest fucking thing in the world. I wanted to be like Nirvana. I thought that was the biggest punk band in the world. It was, but I was just I wasn't exposed to anything cool at that time.
Sure. Yeah.
There was nowhere to play. I couldn't get a show, and finally I got to play at the Chameleon Club in 2005, and they made me play before the doors opened. And I was like, oh, this sucks.
You also make you sell tickets too?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. So we were playing as people were walking in. The back windows had the sunlight shining bright into us. It was the miserable experience. And I was like, I'll do it my own way. Like, so then I started like just booking shows in my basement. I rented out church halls, VFW halls, and then I became in a band, touring, trading shows, became a tour manager, and then I got home and I did my own warehouse shows, and then finally, like, here I am. It's
awesome. Can you say what bands you've toured with?
I've toured with, small bands mostly, but I was a tour manager for a band called Boris.
Yeah.
That was in 2009, 2010. And actually, Jeremy Weiss, Launch Music Conference, got me that job.
That's
that
was because that's the loudest band in the world.
You had to. The tour was Boris and Torch. It was maniacal.
Tinnitus presents.
Yeah, right.
That's awesome. All right, Zemer, come on, give me some backstory here. Tell me what you're doing.
I grew up in Huntington Beach, California, constantly around music and skating and surfing. And so when I moved to Plano, Texas, and I had this spiky hair that doesn't exist anymore and looked like a little Blink-182 kid, everybody assumed that I was a punk. And so all the friends that I made were the kids in punk bands, the kids in rock bands, the kids in metal bands that wanted to hang out with me because they thought that I was that person, and I definitely wasn't, but I became that person due to my association with them. And so I started out like helping them promote their Battle of the Bands events and things like that. And then everybody in Plano was like super rich, and my parents were always like, if you want something, you gotta go wash cars or mow lawns or like do something to make the money before I could have like an actual job. So as soon as everybody was, going to shows all the time, I tried to figure out a way I could get in, and I started interviewing bands for an online music blog and got to interview Census Fail, Brand New, MXPX, got into Warped Tour, met Kevin Lyman, like all that kind of stuff while I was still in high school. And through that, I would get like advanced CDs, and I would talk to label people and managers. And I ended up having a local band tell me that they wanted me to manage them. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but sure, let's do it. And so we like mailed out a bunch of CDs and everything. And they're like, okay, now we need a show. Everything in Dallas is 21 and up. Let's rent out a community center or something. So I borrowed $500 from one of the dude's moms in the band and booked a show. And it was like local bands, and it happened to be around
$500 from the dude's mom.
Yeah.
Did you have to get interest, or was it like a straight, like just a straight?
No, I didn't want to ask my parents because like I didn't want to borrow from my parents. So he was like, my mom will give you $500 and you just gotta pay her back. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I rent out this community center, and it's around South by Southwest. So I ended up putting like Audio Karate and Tokyo Rose and a few of these bands that were coming through for South by Southwest on it as well. And I paid out the bands, I paid out the venue, I gave his mom money back. And I was like, what do I do with this extra money? And they're like, that's yours. Like, you made that. And it was like almost $1,000. And I changed my college from going to Texas Tech to be an architect, and decided to stay in Dallas, try to take some business classes at UNT and see like how the promoter thing would go for me. And about a year and a half after my first show, I ended up getting interviewed for Business Week magazine about being one of the first people to promote music, like concerts and record labels and stuff like that, through MySpace. And I ended up on the cover of the magazine. And So like that was it. I dropped out of college. I was like, I'm a promoter now. And I had like all these like Fortune 500 companies calling me like, can you explain social media to us? And I'm like 20 years old, just like super stoked. I tell my parents I'm going to take a semester off from high school or from college. And I never went back. I kept doing it and been independent for about 16 years now, done everything, like tried the label thing and kind of made that my passion project, artist management, done marketing for other companies, and just kind of like found ways to stay afloat throughout, you know, the ups and downs of concert season and festivals and all that.
I love that, man. That's awesome. So the question for the group, it seems like everybody mentioned a few things that I want to get to. Everyone, like I made the comment before, journeyman, right? Everyone has had different jobs. And also it sounds like a lot of us just tried things. So a question for everybody, how important is, like, to your career was taking big risks at an early age in those beginning stages, where something that could have failed miserably but worked out, or something that did fail miserably? How important was that to your career? Anybody that can jump in on that one.
I mean, for me, like I used that same community center for the first 5 years of my career. And when the small room that we used that was supposed to fit like 400 people started filling up with like 600, I kind of went all out and I got the music hall that had up to 4,000. And I was like, I'm going to put 2 stages in here and I'm just going to do it. And I like flew in, I think it was like Scary Kids and like one other band, and had like this big mix of artists for a Christmas show called Unsilent Night. And like the way those shows worked is there was like no pre-sale other than what the artists sold. Like the idea of putting tickets online was just weird to me. Like the artists would sell physical tickets and then people would show up and pay. And like I guess I wasn't thinking in my head at the time, like I'd never lost money on a show or anything. So I was just like, cool, this is gonna make money, it's gonna be great. And I was like super confident. And sure enough, like the bands start turning in ticket money, and like we're at like 2,000 tickets just from bands, like local bands, and then people walk up and it was like 4,000 people, like it's sold out.
Wow.
And I was just like, holy shit, like how did this happen? Like we went from this small room to like taking a chance in this big room, and it worked. And for a few years before we ended up not being able to use that community center anymore, like that was our main festival, is called Unsilent Night. And then obviously like in March we started doing South by So What, which became So What. But like taking that leap was like the scariest thing I ever did, that I didn't realize was scary at the time. Like if I had just been complacent and comfortable with continuing to do that small room, like I probably wouldn't even be on this chat right now, or like still be a promoter.
How?
Can I jump in here real quick?
Yeah, of course, please.
One of the things that there's only a few shows I feel like I've booked over the years where I was really a nail biter dice roll. You know what I mean? I've always been pretty safe and relatively conservative. But one of the things that I've learned over the years is that having great partners makes a big difference. So in our case, it's almost always been the venue that's been a partner with us. So yes, we might make less money, but you lessen your risk. And you know, when you work with a good partner like that, and there's an understanding, you can feel a little safer about taking that kind of risk.
Sure.
So partnerships, big thumbs up there.
Yeah, that's something that I had to like get out of my own like ego about, like the idea of co-promoting with Live Nation or AEG on shows, when it's like, hey, with our combined abilities, this is going to be a bigger show, a better show, and there's less risk for us as like a smaller company. But for a long time I was like, no, I don't want to work with those guys, I'm going to do this. And then like that show would come around and I would lose money. I'd be like, man, it'd be a lot nicer to have a little bit of something than where I'm at right now.
Yeah. So, well, I actually want to ask Brendan the same question, because you came from a similar world than I did. You said you were booking church basements and VFW halls. I'm sure in those days you took some big risks and you probably had some failures, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, most of those shows were failures. Like at my early aughts of doing shows, I didn't expect to ever make any money. If I made like $30, I was like, this rules. I'll eat dinner at the diner with my friends after the show. I started doing like, bands like Touche Amore and like Wonder Years and La Dispute, and they were starting to this is when they were getting, their up trajectory. And I can't do these shows anymore in these warehouses. Like, it's dangerous for the kids to be here.
Yeah.
And when I went and, I did a show at Chameleon with Joyce Manor, and the agent hit me up and he was like, "Oh, it's AJJ and Joyce Manor, and it's $5,000." And at that time I was like, "What? No, can't do that. I'm terrified of that." And I ended up like just taking the risk, and I had no idea what I would do if I didn't have that show succeed. It sold out, and it like blew me the fuck away. But yeah, at that time, like, you just have to kind of throw it all away and just be like, I could win or I could like lose. I would rather try,
And what's some of it? I mean, if you guys want to talk about it when you were independent, what's some big losses you've had? Because me personally, I lost when I was 27. I lost about $40,000 at a U show that I booked in Long Island, and I
Sounds about right.
had to live with my mom for a few years. Yeah, it's a real story. That really happened. So is anybody else, any of you guys have any like big disaster stories like that?
I lose all the time in Lancaster with indie rock bands. Like, I'm a glutton for punishment in that matter. Like, I love Cloud Nothings. I love Titus Andronicus. I love the Black Lips. And I book all of those bands every single time. Without fail, I lose my ass every single night. Like, I don't know why. I just can't stop booking them. I love them. I want my friends to come out. I want the town to love these bands, but they are just like aggressive losses all the time in this market only.
I lost hard in Harrisburg one time at the Whitaker Center with Bill Wyman, the bass player from the Rolling Stones, with an all-star band with Albert Lee and all the Georgie Fame, all these like English guys from the 60s, but like a really incredible package of guys. And I swear to God, it was like no one cared. I'm like, it's one of the Stones. Who's not going to show up for that? And they did not show up for that. And everybody was cool and gave reductions and stuff. But
That's
oh
great.
my God. Oh my God.
Luckily, he doesn't need it. You're talking to somebody in the Stones. They're probably getting your money elsewhere, so it's not like they need your money from Harrisburg. But that's
No, they played fair. It was mercy. You know what I mean?
I think there's an interesting lesson in there, Brandon touched on, and Jesse, that it's a hard lesson to get through your mind that certain bands could mean the world to you. And when you finally like scratch that holy grail, it doesn't mean that you don't have to work your ass off to make it a success, or that just maybe in your social sphere, they're bigger. And you just have to get used to asking the experts in those genres. Doesn't mean we're not going to book the indie rock bands, and I'm not going to book a ton of hip hop that we lose money on, but
Graham, I always have to tell Rich, Rich and I have it's not our saying, but book with your head and not your heart.
Yeah.
But what I always say to Rich is, I'm like, let Bruce book it up at Sellersville and buy a ticket. It'll cost you less.
yeah. Oh, I've been in that position before. So yeah, actually, that's a good leeway to my next question. There are certain bands that I'm actually not allowed to book in my office because I know that every time I do, I lose money just because I love them so much. So I think it's fair to say, not to be corny, but we all got into this because we love music, right?
Yeah.
Like, we love music, we love live music, we love being around it. How hard is it? And I know you just kind of mentioned a little bit, Jesse. How hard is it to book with your head and not your heart? Because I think we've all been in that position. And Brandon, what you said before is so true. Of like, you want your town to be cool, so you book bands, but you're doing it at the disadvantage of your pocketbook. So, like, at what point do you like, you know what, my town's never going to be cool?
I stopped. Like, I used to care so much as a younger kid, like doing this. I'm gonna book the coolest shows ever in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Like, that's a stupid thing to say, but you know what? I never lose with like booking Puddle of Mud. Like, those kinds of bands, like, they play on the shitty radio station and they play like, but I make money those nights. And I'm like, I'm tired of like justifying it to people. Like, this is something that actually works. Like, I'm sorry.
I actually had to like initiate a company policy based on my own following of my heart and not my head after we did the 10-year anniversary of So What, because we went 9 years without losing money, 9 years of making a lot of money. And so I was kind of in this mindset that like, we were almost too big to fail. And like after talking to Graham, who ran Fun Fest, and like a few other people, I think it's kind of like a common mistake a lot of us have made is like you get to a date or something that's special to you and you want to book it your way. And so for our 10-year anniversary, I put on like all these bands I love. I was like, I want Envy on the Coast. I don't care how much they cost. I want this band. I want that band. And they were all doing 10 years. And I was like, this is so great. It's our 10-year anniversary. They're doing 10-year albums. Well, guess what? The people that like those albums 10 years ago aren't going to sit outside at a festival all day long with a bunch of kids where the other stage is all metalcore. And it was one of the biggest losses we've ever had. And after that festival, I was just like, okay, checks and balances in the office. Tell me I'm being an idiot if one of the bands, if I'm like, hey, I don't care how much this costs, I really just want to see this band, tell me I'm wrong. Like I need somebody to step in and do that, because you really do like you're wearing a Glassjaw shirt, and I had a few sold out Glassjaw shows at Trees, and it was so awesome. And so I was like, we're going to repeat this in like a big old venue and like put them on a festival. They're a headliner. And like, that's just not the case in Dallas, Texas. They're not like a festival headliner. They're a great main support, like big act on a festival, but they're not a headliner. And especially when our demographic is like metalcore, younger demographic. And like, it took the 10-year anniversary of our festival for me to realize that like I'm old, and the bands that I'm excited about are not who these kids are excited about. I need to put Hooyah and Ghostman and mix in these like cool, trendy hip hop artists to my festival way before I throw on.
Wait,
like,
did you
this
say
10-year
Ghost Man?
anniversary.
It's actually Ghost Main. That's how out of touch you are.
There you go.
You just proved it. There you go. That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny. When I was one of the buyers for Bamboozle, I booked Vision of Disorder, who is like a huge band from Long Island back when I was a kid, and they would do hundreds of people. I actually even remember going to Lancaster with Vision Disorder back in the day, and thousands, hundreds of people. I put them on Bamboozle, and I shit you not, I was the only person dancing. And I felt such an obligation to the band. I was the only person moshing the whole set. I was exhausted. My feet were bruised. I was sunburned, but I'm like, fuck it. I have to be the only one going off. That was the thing. So yeah, but I do think that it is very difficult when you love music, because that's all. Again, that's why we got into this. We got into this because we love music. It's hard making the right business decision, you know, when you do this. So what is more important in this, like in this field we're in? Is it loving music or is it business? What's more important? For any of you guys can answer that.
It's business. It has to be business, you know. Loving music, unless you're just a rich person. Like, I love a lot of music, and you know what that means for me? Like, my thing, the way that I self-identify is I like to think I'm the Americana guy, right?
Sure.
So Sturgill, Isbell, all of those acts, you know, I was early, you know what I mean? In 2014, I was early. So I see all these great bands coming out of Nashville, and I see all these people, you know, whether it's Logan Ledger or Daniel Donato or Katie Pruitt, you know, or Michaela Ann, all these great acts. And those are the exceptions. Most of those acts, I end up standing around at my favorite bar, the Dawson Street Pub. It's a 100 cap room where I can give the band 90% of the door after support. You know what I mean? But I end up doing the door. You know what I mean? Because I love these bands. And yet I'm like, why did I cover 200 shows last year after all this time? Why am I still doing that? It must be because I care, because I definitely didn't make any money on those shows. But you have to combine the two in a way where you're like, I'm taking a personal sacrifice because I care about what you do, in the hope that in the future there's a payoff. And in a lot of cases, there can be eventually. You know,
I think there's also a thing like, do you love music or do you need to have the business? Obviously, there's a balance in it, but I got outside of my head at one point and was just like, I could love other people performing music that they love, even if I don't love it. Like,
which is super hard. Which is
there's
like
a ton of shows that I book that, you know, they do super well, and I'm just like, I do not like this band, but these fans they love it. Like, it's the best night of their life. Like, we helped provide a fantastic night for those fans, which sounds kind of corny, but like, really, that's the truth. Like, I really do. I don't mind if it's a country show or a butt rock show or a metalcore show. Those fans are there supporting your business, supporting the bands. Like, they're having a good time. Like, I really do truly love that.
That question is like kind of what's ironic in 2020 to me, is that I'd finally decided that I'm going to focus on the business side. And if I love an artist, I'm going to go see them, whether I have to pay or however, whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to just go see them. And I finally came to terms with the idea of, co-promoting with AEG or Live Nation as many shows as possible, and just like lower risk, maybe less shows, but like trying to enjoy music again, like separating it from being the stressed out promoter. And I bought tickets to like 6 different Rage Against the Machine tour dates. I got Rolling Stones at the Cotton Bowl. Like, I got my tickets to Slam Dunk in the UK. I was going to go like just hang out and like see a festival in the UK for the first time ever. And like now it's like all gone. But it was like that I had finally differentiated that, like, okay, this is a business. So as a business, I have to make business decisions. As a music fan, I can go do whatever I want, but I don't need, overpay to get this artist that I'm going to enjoy more, just going to see somebody else produce the show and be a fan and enjoy it without missing their set because I'm settling or doing whatever. But what are your...
Plus, you'll enjoy the show more if you did book it and got a good deal.
Yeah, for sure.
That's even better.
But that doesn't always work out like that, though, because a lot of times when you want to see a band, you're like, no, hold on. I love this band. Everybody else must love them. They're worth $10,000, but they're worth like $2,000.
Yeah. I think that another lesson is just like, what is the right opportunity for this band? Like, I'm lucky enough to book 3 very different rooms that can work in very different situations. And the putting together the puzzle of what is the right move for this band at this stage in their career is what I get a lot of joy out of. I'm figuring out, okay, this band brought 20 people last time. Are they on their way up or are they on their way down? And that works at any scale.
Graham, how many shows do you go to? You book 1 million shows. How many are you at?
I am at a way lower percentage than the ones you are.
Okay.
Because I'm avoiding the ones that I'm super passionate about. Like, I want to be the math rock guy and mathcore avant-garde metal guy, but I realize that that's not a viable career.
Right.
So I'm at a ton of those shows. I'm at a ton of DIY shows.
Wait, real quick. I really want to know, actually. That's a good question, Jesse. How many shows, real quick, and then we'll get back to what you're talking about, but how many shows a week does everybody here go to? I go to at least 5 to 6 a week.
Absolutely.
In New York. What about everybody? What's everyone's average show count a week?
Yeah, I mean,
much lower.
Probably around that. I go to every show I book.
Nice.
Every single one, I'm there.
Really?
I would say one to 2 on an average week in normal time. And, Jesse is at every books.
Yeah, I mean,
you go to every show.
I at least show
4 shows on a date. You're there.
I at least show face at all those shows because I feel like it's so important to show face.
Absolutely.
Realistically, in the long run, I'm not going to lie, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It really doesn't, because it's like roulette. It's like every so often you hit on one where you actually have a relationship with the act or the tour manager or whomever it is that's really at the show where you bond. You know what I mean? And that's super worth it. I mean, I have some really good relationships just from standing around at shows and seeing guys a couple of times or whatever, But, again, Christian, you referenced our age, and I think I'm getting to the point where I'm like, I just don't care that much anymore. I can't sustain that much, even if I'm not there all night. You know what I mean? If I show up at a show at 8 o'clock, and I'll be honest with you, I go to bed at 10 or 10:30 because I wake up at 5:30 in the morning, So I can't, it doesn't matter how late I stay out. I'm still getting up early. You
I
know?
think my biggest fear is something going wrong and I'm not there.
Mm-hmm.
And like I can't deal with that in my head mentally. So like right before Christmas we had August Burns Red at the convention center in Lancaster. I had a hip hop show at Chameleon Club, and then I had a show in Harrisburg, and I went to all three, like just boom, 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 and then came back and then went to another one. I know no one's gonna care if I'm actually there, but like in my head I'm just like, I can't miss this.
You're 100% right. You're 100% right.
It's in your blood,
Yeah.
like I think I've heard a lot of people talk. This guy, Adam Grant, talks about entrepreneurs, says how like entrepreneurs are different or a certain type of species. To some degree, even though I work for a big company, I started, by myself. In the last launch conference I did years ago, I talked about being an entrepreneur because in a sense, we're all entrepreneurs, right? And we all run our own businesses, and this weird thing that's in our blood, we all have insane FOMO. That not only do we need to be at every show, but because we had a hand in it, you got to make sure shit goes okay.
It's your ass on the line at the end of the night.
Oh,
if
yeah.
something goes wrong or something goes really right, you don't want to call the next morning from the agent being like, man, I heard there was a marriage proposal on stage. And you're like, I wasn't there. There you go. You're an
That's
idiot.
a good case scenario, though. The marriage proposal. That's the best case scenario.
I think it's from like doing shows in shitty, rooms and basements, and like the PA would go out, and no one knew how to run a PA, but I would, so I like have to be there. So I think that's like ingrained in my memory. Like, God forbid, what if the PA goes out somewhere? I couldn't do that. I don't know how to run our fucking sound system anymore. Yeah. But it's just like in my head, like if it goes bad, I want to be there to be able to like just look.
But see, that's how you learn, though, and I think that's why it's like I think everybody who's just coming into it, that was certainly impressed on me early on. Go to every show. How do I get ahead in the world? How do I make this work for me? You got to be there. It doesn't do you any good if you're not there, Yeah.
I got to know, since a lot of us have an independent background and started doing stuff ourselves, I want to hear some crazy ass stories. What is the craziest shit that's ever happened at one of your shows that you're willing to talk about? Because I have some, and I'm sure everybody here has some crazy shit.
Oh man, I have a cool one. Sebastian Bach of Skid Row. So when I was a kid, I saw Sebastian Bach play Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ Superstar, and I
remember that.
I thought he was a fucking god.
Oh, like, well, he was also on Jekyll and Hyde too. He did.
Yeah,
Broadway. Yeah.
His voice is incredible. Anyway, I have loved him forever, and I ended up booking him last year. And actually, the PA went out in his third song, and I go back.
What song was it? Piece of Me?
Dude, I think it may have been fucking, what the hell is that? I forget now. But anyway, the whole like sound crew is back there trying to figure out what's going on, and he hops off the stage, and I'm just like trying to console him because he's clearly upset. And I said, we'll get it figured out. And he goes, well, you better get it fucking figured out, or this will be the shortest fucking show of your life, you fucking loser. And I was just like, no, like it just like crushed my whole being for this guy that I love to call me a loser.
That's what we talked about before. It's so hard. It's really difficult to book things that you care about, because I definitely have I never want to meet my idols thing.
Yeah.
Because when you do, those kind of things could happen. Now that's what you think about with Sebastian Bach, is him calling you a loser.
Yeah, it was awful.
Mine is just like the annual fight at So What. Like there's always something at the festival, and it's always me. Like I don't fight anybody. I have I can get aggressive and like in your face, but like I don't like to fight. And the first year that we moved into the ballpark, the bartender was like super drunk at the after party, spilling everyone's drinks and being rude. And he swung on me, and so I ducked and like swung back, and then there was like this garage door thing, and some security guy came up and slammed it. And so I'm like, oh great, we're never gonna come back here. And then the next year, I almost fought Danny from Asking Alexandria because he was drunk and stole a golf cart from security. and was riding around in it.
Oh, always. That shit
And-
always. The stolen golf carts. We learned at Bamboozle one year that we just had an extra one there to let people steal.
And then the next year, it rained, and we were trying to figure out what's going on. There's like rain going on, lightning, like possible tornado. And the guy from Mindless Self-Indulgence, who's like the tour manager, who's like 10 times my size, is like, we need to get paid and get out of here. I'm like, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm like, with the managers of Bring Me the Horizon and like all these other bands. And this dude's like, no, I just need to get paid and get out of here. And like, he keeps interrupting me. I'm with the fire marshal, the cops, everybody. And I just look at him and I go, shut the fuck up or I'm not paying you. And I like, as it comes out of my mouth, I realize how much bigger this guy is. And like everyone around me, like Thomas Gutchis and like all these people kind of just like freeze. And they're just like, hey, can we just have a moment? Like kind of politely get him to leave. And then the next year, Power Trip and some of the other hardcore dudes like Code Orange and stuff like end up in this fight with my security. And I have to come down there. And then the last fight that happened was after the miserable experience that the Devil Wears Prada had down in Mission, Texas with that festival, just like completely flopping and getting their van stuck and having like a 20-hour drive back to Dallas somehow. The tour manager is just like ready to go, trying to load out the band. And Under Oath had locked down the stage. Security didn't realize that it was Devil Wears Prada. He's like walking by. He starts getting in a fight with security. We like had a perfect festival. I think everything's just great. And I thought everyone was trolling me and they were like going to congratulate me on the festival or something. It's like, you need to come down here. There's this big fight. And so I start running down there. I'm excited. And then I see a brawl. And I'm like, oh shit, this is real. And I'm like not thinking that like it's cold. So I have my hoodie up. I'm just in this dark black hoodie. And I run up and like grab a police officer who's like pulling the Devil Wears Prada tour manager off of somebody. And he like turns around and he's like about to swing on me. And he's like, Mike, you can't do that. You can't run up. And like, then he puts us in a fucking like not holding cell, but like the equivalent to it at the baseball stadium for the whole entire Under Oath set. I've waited years for Under Oath to reunite, to be at my festival. I missed the entire set because we're sitting there with cops explaining why they should take him to jail, why I need to go to jail for being a part of it. And then finally lets everybody go. And I'm just like, why is there always something at this festival every year? It's like how you know it's a good festival, I guess. Because the 10 year we didn't have any fights.
That's amazing.
That's
Jesse,
insane.
what about you? Give me some crazy stories.
All right, I'll give you a good
Bonus
one.
points if I haven't heard it.
Okay. What's that?
Bonus points if I haven't heard it.
All right. I'm gonna give Graham one then. Graham, I'm working, and I'm not gonna name the band, but I'm working with a very popular electro jam band from Philadelphia in December of 2000, maybe. And we're doing 2 nights at the Silo in Reading. Any of you guys ever been out there?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. It's some kind of low rent Greek mafia run venue.
Yep.
Anyway, the band's in, they're doing the lights and all this shit. And down in the dressing room, what happened was as soon as the door opened, all of the security guards disappeared and left me and the owner of the club to tear 1,200 tickets and do they all disappeared. So we're freaking out doing all this work. I'm by myself. I don't have an assistant. And as that's happening, somebody comes up and taps me and goes, the cops just went into the dressing room downstairs. And I'm like, oh my God, because these guys are tokers, and this is not as liberal a time as it is now. So I go down to the dressing room and the cops are standing there with everybody's shit, everybody's backpacks and stuff like that. And they're like, listen, our concern is not the quantity of marijuana in this room. It's the quality of the marijuana in this room that concerns us the most. And we don't understand where do you get weed like this? And I'm like, look, man, these people, this is what they do. They're pot smokers. They spend their money on weed. That's why they got this nice high grade weed. Let's not arrest everybody. We have 2 sold out nights here. You just walked into the band's dressing room without knocking. Like, what is that, And while I'm doing this delicate negotiation, the tour manager comes into the room, walks right into the middle of us and looks at the cops and goes, just so everybody's clear, there was $600 in that backpack that's not there now. And the only people who have been in this room since it disappeared are the cops. And then he turns around and walks out. And the cops are like, did you really just accuse us of stealing the money? And I'm like, well, it looks that way to me. You know what I mean? It looks like kind of like that. So we ended up being able to they took the weed. They confiscated the weed, but I got everybody's shit back. And then the cops went and shook down the security guards who disappeared when the doors opened and got our $600 back. Because security had gone right to the dressing room, robbed the band.
No.
And then the police showed up. You know what I mean?
God.
Right? So that night ended with me walking through a parking lot of people completely out of their fucking gourds with like $20,000 or $30,000 in cash, just like in a hat under my arm, because it was totally unprepared. Like, had no idea that it was going to be all up to me, you know. And the second night, I got an assistant up for that one. Right?
That's amazing.
Yep. But if you want I got the name drop in a story on Earth if it comes back around to me. If you want.
Okay, yeah. So truth be told, we just got, so if you couldn't figure out while you're watching at home, we're actually doing this. Everyone's in their houses doing the Zoom, and I actually just got a message about a question that I need to ask because
Okay.
I got some directions and we were having so much fun and got off topic. So obviously a lot of people that watch and go to this conference are in bands. That's obviously what a big deal is. So let's talk about like what it's like being in a younger band. You know, I'm unfortunately not at a point in my career where I book a lot of younger bands, unfortunately, and I miss it because it is such an integral part of the music community as a whole. But, you know, do you guys still get a chance to book a lot of local bands? And what do you look for in younger bands? And also, too, like, what advice do you have for those bands? I hope I asked that right, Spencer.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I start?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
I do book a ton of local bands. It's one of my favorite parts of the job because it feels very connected to this Philly community that I love so very much. And when we are booking local bands, that idea of knowing what the right opportunity it is at the right time is extra important at the beginning of your career. Maybe it's more quantity. But yeah, I absolutely love hearing new music coming out, especially if it's within my personal taste. And every once in a while, there's something
Metal,
that comes
right? What's your taste? Gent metal?
not gent per se, but the weirdest shit, definitely. And I do book a ton of stuff that I get a lot of satisfaction out of booking jam bands and stuff. It's not my cup of tea, but every once in a while I'll get something unsolicited. I'll not have a place for it, but I'll be like, I'll add it to my library and listen to it a ton.
Real quick though, we mentioned this. We mentioned this before, and I think it is important to mention when you're talking to bands. Just because you don't like a particular kind of music, it doesn't mean that you're not going to acknowledge how good a band is. So I think like when you're a younger band, it's really important to keep in mind that even though there's somebody who you might not assume would dig your band, you still want to show them your band anyway. Because I think I can speak on behalf of all of us. I'm not going to say what kind of music I don't like or do like, but there's a lot of music I don't like, but I can tell who's good at it.
Yep.
Yeah, for
Totally.
sure.
Yeah, that overall quality is important. Go ahead, Jesse.
No, I just want to say that, you know, Graham, in relation to what you're saying, I actually play in bands, and years ago was like, I'm not doing this to make a living, but I hold my own bands to the same standards as the bands that I book. So when Graham says to me, I might be able to give you a Sunday night on a door deal at 118 playing the dinner I'm like, great, that's great. I'm happy to do that. I, in every step of the way, hold my own band to the same standard. And that way, when people call me on it, I'm like, hey man, you know what I mean? But it also means that a lot of the venues that we book and that we're involved in, I've played as well as booked. So I can be like, look, I can tell you it's a good room. I played the room. You know what I mean?
But I'm sure that gives you some humility being in a band.
Absolutely.
Also, like that, a lot of perspective that people don't know. Because actually understanding the position that a local band or a younger band is in is really important because it's a pretty tough position to be in a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Who else wants
Yeah.
to go?
I mean, at the Chameleon, we have a 200 cap room in the basement called the Lizard Lounge, and there's quite a few people probably tuning in for launch that have been to the club and have maybe themselves played the small room. And there's so many.
I have.
Yep. There's so many times where I have a band playing downstairs, and there might be a bigger show or a sold out show upstairs, and take them up and sit them side stage and be like, check this show out, like see this, and they appreciate that because they can see that growth. Like, hey, like all these bands that play upstairs on these sold out shows probably played down in the basement before they got to that point. And after they get too big for the 800 cap room, they skip Lancaster altogether and play somewhere else. Like, I think it's important for young bands to see that you do have to put the work in and start on the ground level and be humble and work with the promoter, work with the venue, work with the security staff, work with everyone, and be gracious, and then move on. Keep on moving up and stay grateful for everything.
Absolutely. For us, like, local bands have always been such a big part of what we do. Like I said earlier, we started out as me helping out local bands and then building into something that, like the So What from the beginning was always like half touring bands that happen to be coming to South by Southwest and half local bands. And we've tried to always keep local bands as involved as possible, and not even just like necessarily having a local band on every show to pre-sell tickets, but even on like sold out opportunities, like trying to fight for like a really hardworking local band. And I do all sorts of like contests to submit your music to like be on playlists that I push, or to open up shows, or even like I just did something through Reverb Nation to search for unsigned talent to sign to my record label, which is a passion project of mine. And like, I love local bands, and I love looking back and seeing like, hey, can you add this small band from Austin for $50? They want to come up, and then that small band from Austin becomes like some big band over time, and like you've got to watch them grow and all that. And I just think it's also very crucial to having a support system within like the metal, hardcore, pop punk, like that whole all ages world of shows. If you're including the bands, it makes them want to come out to shows. It makes them want to be supporting what you're doing. It makes them want to, be in the scene, knowing that their involvement in the scene goes somewhere, gets recognized, and that if they work hard for a show and they are polite and they're not, like rude, and they don't overstay their welcome on stage and things like that, that like they become like a bigger part of things. Like, perfect example is like Crown the Empire, Polyphia. Like, those bands started out hustling tickets to our local shows and then worked their way up through the clubs. And I tour managed the first Crown the Empire Texas tour and then US tour, where they would get back to the hotel every night after shows, and they would sit on their laptops and they would just message people from those cities and like add people that went to the show and talk to them and like put in all that work. And like it local bands that do those things, they get noticed, and they end up going from being that local band that was trying really hard to sell 100 tickets to a national band selling out shows across the country. The work ethic that you begin with as a local band is what will take you to that level and will be recognized and respected by promoters and managers and the bands you play with.
Yeah, one thing I'll say that I think is extremely important with anything in life, like not just being in a band, but I think like, act locally is super important, right? Like, I think that once you try to like be the biggest band where you are, it's important because like that organic following is what's going to make people like us decide whether or not we want to put you on a show or not. Like if we know that you have that following, it does really help. But additionally, though, like I'm in New York. I know some of you guys are in Philly. It's a lot harder in those local markets for bands to actually do stuff because of just the volume, right? But I also think, though, what's important is that, like, if you live in Philly, if you live in New York, and you're playing your markets and doing okay, but also go to the suburbs. Go to Lancaster, go to Long Island, go to Jersey, go to those places as well, and just kind of really build like the local swell within like a 3 or 4 hour driving radius of your house.
Yeah, regional shows are very important. And that's why I tell everyone here in Texas is that if you start making some waves in Dallas, go play Austin, go play San Antonio, play Houston, play College Station, like take your spring break and do, a 10-date tour around Texas, because you could probably do a month-long tour if you wanted to. There's so many cities and little markets, and it goes a long way to put in that effort to really build yourself up in not only your market but the surrounding markets. And where you guys are at, you have a big advantage because there's so many different markets all in such a close proximity.
Yeah. So let's talk about a taboo subject here. Do we all make band sell tickets? Oh, you guys make band sell tickets, or what's your vibe on it? Mike,
Physical tickets, you mean, to clarify?
what's up?
To clarify, you mean like physical consignment
Yeah, like
tickets?
is it like, do you make a band sell a minimum of tickets to play a show, or what's your policies on that?
We generally ask bands, are you willing to sell tickets? If we think it's something that needs to be done for the show, then we'll be honest with them and be like, well, if you don't want to sell tickets to the show, then you're probably not the right band for it. They'll tell us a number, or we'll suggest a number. We never kick the band off a show for not selling it, but we do pay them based on it. So we'll give them, like $2 a ticket. And then if they hit whatever they promised they were going to give, like if it's 50 tickets, if it's 30 tickets, if it's 100 tickets to some big show, like we'll base a bonus on that as well. But we will never, like, I know in LA and different places, sometimes you like have to actually buy the tickets and like sign an agreement to a minimum and stuff like that. We don't do that, but we definitely encourage bands to sell, to not only bring out an early crowd, but to get paid for playing.
This will be my last thing that I say, because my wife is telling me that dinner is ready. So I do have to leave after this. But I will say, if a local band hops on a show and we get a local for a touring act and we need someone to draw, I'm very upfront with them and say, this is how you're going to get paid. So
Sure.
You're never going to have to buy these tickets from me in advance. You don't have to commit to selling a level. It's just whatever you sell, you will get a portion of that ticket for your band. And my whole thing is just being honest with everyone. Like, everyone kind of has this thing, oh, the music business is shady, or promoters are shady, or venues, blah, blah, blah. Just communication is key. Like, you got to do, like, you just have to do it.
Now, real quick, I know you got to go for dinner, but I wanted to ask you this question, Brendan. So you obviously came from, I think, a similar background that I did, where you were booking hall and VFW hall shows in the hard scene, and obviously in that world, you can't sell, like, it just
No.
you don't have anybody sell tickets. And what's funny is that I can't remember the last time I had a show where I had a band sell tickets, just because I just do things on a different level now.
Yeah.
But literally on I was on fucking Facebook 3 months ago, and kids were talking shit about me for making band sell tickets to a show like 15 years ago. Like,
I'm not still get that.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. It's so crazy that, like, in certain world, but I also think it's important too. Like, you're not going to make hardcore bands sell tickets because it's not right for that world. But it just depends. It works in certain scenes, and certain scenes it just doesn't. I think everybody's on the same.
There is a friend from a past life when I was very into hardcore bands, and called me a quote unquote sellout for working at the Chameleon Club. And he said on the internet in an argument that I worked for Clear Channel. And obviously the insult was that I worked for Live Nation. But he got the wrong industry.
Well, you should go take care of your dog before your leg falls off.
All right. See you later, gentlemen. Nice meeting everyone. Thank you so much.
I think a good point to go along with that, since this is mostly geared towards bands, is that you need to establish the agreement with the promoter before a show, so that you don't just go on the internet and get pissed off that you didn't get paid, or that this was expected of you. Like, if you're like, well, again, I'll use Polyphia as an example. They came to us and they said, we want to play your festival. We are capable of selling this amount of tickets. And since we know no other band is capable of doing that, we want this much money. They were like popular kids in school, had a big network. They could draw 300 kids to my festival. And so they're like, we want this much. And it's more than we ever paid any other band. And we're like, okay, if you sell that much, then we're going to give that to you. Like, that's like, you have to have that level of professionalism, and you have to, like, be honest with the promoter, be like, we will draw 100 people walk up, but we just don't have time to sell tickets. Like, we have day jobs. And then actually bring those people.
Yeah.
But it's super important to establish those ground rules with the promoter, because sometimes like we're not thinking about it. We have, you know, a calendar of 200 shows, and you hit us up and say, hey, can we play this? And we're like, yeah, sure. Here you go. Here's the flyer. Like if it's like that, you're probably not getting paid. You're just, you know, you're playing for exposure. But if you communicate something like, hey, you know, one of our guys lives this far and we got to drive, like, can we get $50? Then I'm pretty sure a promoter is going to say yes, but you just can't expect that. It has to be figured out in advance.
Absolutely. I'm so surprised how many bands I book on shows who don't even know to ask, hey, what's the pay structure? Maybe it's a little bit of a power dynamic. It's like, oh, I'm so lucky for this opportunity. And I felt that when I was in a band. I wasn't asked until I was a promoter. I wasn't upfront asking, because you're like, oh, maybe the promoter's going to see me as shit, like not appreciative of the opportunity.
Yeah.
But I appreciate when you're asking. It makes me think about it earlier, so I don't have to think about it the night of the show what you're getting paid. So, and I'd encourage everybody when reaching out, as soon as if it's any sort of opportunity, just ask, what's the pay structure? And that'll actually help you understand the deal structure the more you ask that question. And don't be afraid to negotiate. Like, that's what we're in the business of doing.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Cool. Sorry, Jesse. I thought you were going to say something.
I was just agreeing with Graham. I mean,
Yeah.
it's obviously, yeah. I mean, you want to. I same thing. I've had people be like, "What do you mean this is all I'm getting paid?" And I'm like, "Well, that's what's in the budget. It's just math. If you got a problem," and this is another thing I think a lot of times artists don't understand, is that how much money the opening act gets paid, a lot of times is determined by the budget of the show.
Oh, yeah.
Times, which is determined by the headlining act. So I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, you want more money? Go talk to that guy over there, the guy singing. Go ask him.
You know what's funny? All right, so I'm wearing a Glassjaw shirt, and they're some of my best friends in the world, and I doubt any of them are going to watch this so I could tell the story. So about 19 years ago, 20 years ago, right before they got signed to Roadrunner, they were the biggest band on Long Island. They were massive, and I had them open up for Snapcase. And I think that, and you know, arguably they probably drew as much as Snapcase, and Glassjaw got paid $500. And I got into a massive fight with them, because they couldn't understand why they got so much money. But as to your point, that was the budget. You know, the budget was $500 for the support act, and they just didn't understand it. And I do think that like Mike said, that communication, and also like we said before, just business in general, like as much as we love music, when you're in a band, you're a promoter, you do have to understand the business aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there has to be
math.
Yeah, you have to know how to do math. I hated math in school. I took a math class 10 years ago just because I wanted to relearn it, just because it's so important.
But bands generally are not good at math, because they'll come up to you and they'll say, we sold 20 tickets at $10 a piece, so we just made you $200. And it's like, that's not just profit. There's expenses in the show. Like,
yeah, that's true.
I love like when I first started doing festivals, and it was $30 for a ticket to see like 60 bands, and people were like, oh, well, there's 4,000 people here, $30. He just made $120,000. I bet he's gonna go buy a new car. I'm like, yeah, all these bands played for free. The venue was just given to me, all the catering that they got, like security, everything.
Yeah. That's why, but that's why one of the points that I wanted to make too, when I have advice for bands, I think it's really important for bands to understand as many aspects of the business as they can, such as promoting shows. Not to mention, you might even decide you might like that more than being in a band. You know, like, I mean, we kind of mentioned before, and Jesse, you're a musician, but you're also, you know, a promoter. You also might realize you like that aspect more. And let's be honest, there's more longevity in being a promoter than there might be being in a band. You know, I mean, you could be in a band your whole life, but this is a full-time gig that we have, right? You know, like we're all
absolutely,
this is a job. So I think that what's important to remember when you are a band and you are touring or whatever, learn every aspect, learn the label side, learn the live music side, learn how to do sound, learn everything, because the majority of people that I know that do this business started being in bands, you know, and then they eventually decided that being on the other side of the fence behooves me much more than being in a band every day. And if it doesn't, that's fine. But you realize there is some longevity in the music business. And a lot of times you learn that from being in a band.
I actually had, when I was promoting all those shows at the Plano Center, there was this band that always wanted to play, and they were a ska band, and like ska was not cool in 2004 to 2009 when I was booking shows. I don't know if ska has ever been cool as a full genre, but it just didn't fit. Like, it
Don't
didn't fit
tell
on.
Graham that. Don't tell Graham that. Right?
Hey, personally, I love ska. I listen to all of it. But what is it? Yesterday's or Stacked Like Pancakes, is that the band that always is at launch? I discovered there. Shout out if you're watching. But yeah, so like this band, they were a ska band, and like it just didn't make sense to have them play my shows when I'm having like all this metalcore MySpace stuff. And so one of the kids' dads opened up a venue in Plano in the shopping mall, like strip mall, where there was like a exit away from the Plano Center, and started doing shows there on a regular basis as a venue as a result of me not booking his son on the shows. And
Look at that.
I always
You
thought it
fired
was so,
people.
I thought it was so cool. And like that kid hated me, but I respected so much that like, that's what he did. Like he got to play so many more shows because he decided to have his dad help him open up a venue than if I put him on like 2 of my shows. So he won in that one.
People are gonna hate you. That's one thing you learn as a promoter, that people are gonna hate you. They're gonna talk shit about you.
Oh yeah.
It's an unusual position we're all in because there is some power that goes with it.
My wife gets so mad. People have said to my wife before, because we don't share the same last name, they've been like, you know who I really hate? Jesse Lundy. And she's like, really? I'm married to him. That is absolutely 100% happened, you know?
It's a thing. It's a real thing that we have to deal with. All right, so this has been going for a little bit. We've been talking for more than an hour. So we should probably start to wrap this up. But, you know, we're going to try to deal with this as generally as possible, since this is airing in July. This is not July when we're having a conversation, but there's a pandemic happening right now. But I do want to kind of touch on it because I do want to ask this question. And I do think this is an interesting question for this group. You're a local band, or you're a band, and you do want to get out and play there and do things, but you can't because there's a pandemic. Now, when this airs, a pandemic might be done. But let's just say there's another pandemic and you're caught in your house for 3 or 4 months. What do you do as a band when you can't play shows because there's a pandemic and there's a quarantine?
So I've actually been talking to a lot of bands and managers. I didn't know what else to do with my time, so I've been offering like free consulting calls to talk to them, and that's been the number one question. So I'm sure I'm not the only person to use this phrase, but I came up with the idea of like digital touring and pitching that to them, where like you reach out to a venue, to a coffee shop, to a clothing line, to some local business, restaurant, whatever in your area, and maybe even beyond, and just like hit them up to go on their live stream and like use these brands, use these festivals that are happening, and just kind of like perform on there. Because you're getting, like, say that you hit me up right now and you're like, hey, I see that you're not posting anything on the So What Facebook. Can we go live from it? Well, that's 70,000 people that could potentially tune in and watch what you're doing. And I'm going to say yes, because I don't have anything on there right now. And you're not interrupting anything. Like, I don't know what to post on the Third String pages. Hey, here's a show. Please buy a ticket. We don't know when it's happening. Like, I just haven't promoted anything. Like, I haven't done my job because I don't know when I'm going to have that job. So if this is all still going on and you still need advice, I would say hit up anybody that has more followers than you, more friends, whatever. Ask them if you can go live on their channel, and then ask, like, put your link up there, get your
For a small fee,
donations
hit up
or
Mike
whatever.
Zemer at Instagram.com.
Come on mine. I got like 4,000 people that watch you.
Jesse, you had something.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. This is a great time. It's really everything Mike just said. I mean, you know, content is king, and staying on top of that. You know, people are going. I mean, we're talking before July, as we discussed, but people are going to be writing coronavirus-related songs, lockdown songs. Be the one that writes the good one, because you know, like there's going to be a good one. And absolutely keep kicking out content. But, you know, the other thing, and Mike, here's where we differ, is today I put up a post on my Facebook page saying, hey, look, how many people have said, let me pick your brain over the years? And a few years ago, I realized that I am going to start monetizing that, because it is a way to make some extra, you know, it's a side hustle. And right now, that's all I got is a side hustle. So, it's like, this is a great opportunity to reach out to people and just try to learn something. The reason I got into management, into band management in 2003, which I did successfully for a few years, was just because I wanted to learn something new about the industry. It was a new skill set for me, the same way I should be learning social media marketing during this break, I'm not doing, but it's just take advantage of the time if you have it. And
Right.
By all means, don't just sit on your hands. It's obviously everybody has their emotions about how they feel about everything, but it is an opportunity if you are able to take it.
Cool.
Yeah, to piggyback off of Jesse, I think it is a great opportunity to network. Like, people who have these skills are bored in their house, and they are going to answer your emails much quicker. They want something new to occupy their minds. I think it's shoot high. Don't be afraid to ask your favorite band, reach out to them somehow, find out who their manager is on their Facebook and pick the manager's brain. Say, hey, I'm thinking of going into the industry, or I'm at this stage in my career. Can I talk to you? I've been playing a lot more, and I want to take this time to write more music. I did a virtual bass lesson, which was awesome. I haven't gotten the opportunity to do in a long time. But yeah, to both of you, network and then keep creating content. Just use the time to get a solid recording setup, and once this is all over, you'll be in a better place to keep creating content. And whether you should be releasing it right now is another story, but there will be a day when things are back to normal, and I'm sure you'll be happy that you set yourself up for success.
What's interesting about what you said about monetizing, pick your brain and monetizing it and everything, is that I started out with those calls just to cure my boredom, to have some kind of routine and to try to help people out. And then I literally tell people, this is the software I use for ads. This is where I go to submit for playlists, blah, blah, blah. By the end of that call, they're like, well, can we just hire you to do consulting or do our marketing or whatever? And I guess it's a good time to be us, because people would rather, pay someone to do it if they have the money than to, most people, than to learn the new skills. But yeah, it's been interesting. I hope that we get to do shows again sometime, because I'm trying to I've been talking to other promoters, and these people for the first time in decades are getting 9-to-5 jobs, or volunteering, or not volunteering, but signing up to go work for Amazon or whatever. And I'm just I don't know, it's weird.
It's the big question right now that I think we all have to ask ourselves really is, would you like fries with that?
I mean, it is an interesting point. I mean, we joke, but there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think that to Jesse's point before, I say it all the time to my assistants, to my interns, that side hustle could be your strongest muscle, and maybe I gotta work a little bit, but something with the hustle and muscle, it's there. I just can't figure out what it is. But that side hustle is super fucking important. And, especially when you live in a city like New York, and for band people, if you're in a band, how many people I know that are in bands, that are in full-time bands, but also have day jobs, even successful bands. I think that's one thing that shocks people when they find out, is that it costs so much money to be in a band that a lot of people, a lot of times when you're in bands, you do have a day job. You do trade. I mean, Mike, we could talk about how it blows my mind how in the past 6 months everyone's become a day trader. With the stock market, that's so big. But it is important to have that side hustle. Everybody, you should always remember that when you're in a band, it's important to make money while you're in a band. But when the band's done, you also want to be able to make some money as well.
It crushed my dreams of the music industry when there was I think it was an alternative press article, and it was talking about Jeff Rickley from Thursday going back to his job after tour, and all these people that were so colossal in my little scene kid brain. And I'm reading about them going back to their day jobs. I'm like, how am I ever going to make it in music if these guys are still going and doing this? And it's very important to recognize that.
You look at a guy like John Strom, who was my indie rock guitar player of the 90s, and he's running Rounder Records now. and Chris Colburn, who was the bass player in Buffalo Tom. And yes, I'm dating myself to the 90s in Boston here. But, you know, these guys were guys that I looked up to as musicians, and Chris is an agent at Concerted Efforts. Like I said, John's running Rounder Records. Like that's a nice step forward. That's a nice direction to go in the long
Yeah.
run.
Yeah, and I say it all the time that, like, you know, I have so many friends that are techs, that are roadies, that are, you know, whatever, but that's a full-time job. You know,
Yeah.
like, it's like once you kind of realize that you can put aside, you do your touring, you know, but once you realize, hey, maybe the band is not going to work out for me, like the guy tuning the guitar is going to make more money than I'm making anyway.
Well, remember too that when this all went down, the first, and I'm happy about this, but the first people who the funds were set up for were crew.
Right.
It wasn't us, you know,
Sure.
I mean, it was the crew, you know, and those are the people that are working. They're working hard. They don't have, not that I feel like necessarily we all have some sort of safety net, but I respect that.
Yeah, I get that. Cool. Well, thank you guys for this. This has been amazing. In closing, does anybody have anything? Any parting words, words of wisdom? Going once, going
Covered a
twice,
lot.
forever.
Like fries with that.
Thank you very much,
Sale jokes.
guys. Thank you, guys. Thanks to Graham. Thanks to Jesse. Thanks to
you.
Mike. Thanks for Brandon, who's I literally thought his dog was going to kill him. But he's not here. Thank you to Spencer, and thank you to Jeremy and all the fantastic people at Launch for asking us to do this. Yeah, go do something positive for the world. Book some shows, bands. All right, see you guys.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.